Howdy, everybody. Welcome. This is Project Herpetoculture Podcast, episode number 69. And I'm your host, Roy Arthur Blodgett, joined, as always, by the handsome and charismatic Philip Leitz of Arids Only. And we have an excellent show today with a return guest who I'm sure many of you will be happy to hear from. But before we dive into that, we have some quick housekeeping and announcements. So I'm going to go right through it. And first, I want to give a shout out to Charlie. And he edits our audio and provides our theme music. So we really appreciate him for that. I also want to give a shout out to Dylan and the Animals at Home Network for hosting our show. And next I want to talk about our sponsors. We've got Custom Reptile Habitats, and they are makers of premium PVC reptile enclosures. I use them personally for a lot of the larger format Vivaria here. And they also have a whole bunch of other useful products like Universal Rocks backgrounds and Miss King products. So if you're in the market for any of that and you're looking to make a purchase, if you do so through the link in our bio or description, we'll receive a small commission at no additional cost to you. And that's always greatly appreciated here. Helps keep the lights on. Next, we have Cold-Blooded Caffeine, and they are roasters of delicious coffees from all over the world. We have a private label with them, the Project Herpetoculture, which is a light roast from Rwanda. Highly recommend trying that out if you like lighter roast coffees. But they have a whole bunch of other stuff too, medium roast, dark roast, whatever you're looking for really. But whatever you do order for them, use the code Project Herp and you'll get 10% off your order. Highly recommend trying them out. And lastly, we have Tamura Designs. And those in the know that Tamura Designs produces some of the finest reptile enclosures on the market today. They produce some incredible custom large format displays with drains and all sorts of UV printed backgrounds, a whole bunch of unique features that are pretty hard to find elsewhere. In addition to that, they produce these incredible condo setups, which I use for raising up all of the younger specimens here of my lizards and snakes. And they produce deli cup displays, all kinds of cool stuff. Highly recommend checking them out, giving them a follow on social media. And if you are in the market for something a little higher end, a nice display vivarium, or you're looking to use some condos for grow outs or for smaller species like Rhacodactylus, that kind of thing, check out Tamura and use the code Herpetoculture for 15% off your order there. We really appreciate them for signing on and supporting the show. It really means a lot. And get out there and use that code, y'all. It's pretty rare to get a discount code for these guys. With all that said, I wanted to do a couple quick announcements as well. One is that we have another webinar coming up with Happy Dragons. This one is on researching your reptile, and we're going to be joined by Mariah Healy of Reptophiles fame. We're super stoked for this one. It's going to be really valuable information, useful. So check it out in our Instagram page. There's a link in bio there. Also over on the Happy Dragons page, but it will be on February 3rd. That's a Saturday, and it'll be over on the Happy Dragons Twitch channel. So come on out and join us. It's going to be an excellent live presentation, and we'll also be there for Q&A and everything afterwards as well. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is that we will be at IHS, or at least I will be. It's possible Phil won't be able to make it this year. He's got some big things happening, like a child on the way. So I will be there, though, representing Project Herpetoculture and joining Dr. Crawdad, Dr. Zach Loafman. The two of us will be kind of curating some keeper talks at the IHS this year. And we're really excited to be there and participate in this event. It's a legacy event in herpetoculture, and this is a really cool way for us to get involved. So if you're interested in IHS, interested in coming out and having a more kind of scientific, a little bit more focused discussion lecture series, IHS this year will be in Knoxville. It's going to be an awesome time, several days of incredible talks. There's also a visit to the Knoxville Zoo. A whole bunch more information about it online if you want to check out the IHS website. But we'll also have more announcements coming up about that here soon. So with all out of the way, I am very pleased to send you to the show. Thank you.
All right. So Ron, we were talking about, before we hit the record button, you were talking about this winter being kind of like the most challenging or stressful or anxiety riddled winter that you've had so far. Can you reiterate a little bit as to why that is?
Yeah, I mean, because of El Nino, it's basically cursed us with a warm but wet winter. And when I say warm, I mean, we're not getting the freezes that we would normally get, twice a month or so. Instead, we're getting like this middling kind of, not warm enough to warm the animals up to a point where the activity is good, but not cold enough to cause, the typical cycle, which would be that if it really got cold in Florida, it's usually very sunny. Because cloud cover works as a blanket, and so when it gets really cold, there's usually no cloud cover, and so you get plenty of sun. And then the system that we do is to cover everything in 6 mil clear plastic. So you need sunlight to hit that to warm up the enclosures and keep them, at a good temperature. But this year, because of El Nino, it was super wet, and it was middling temperatures, which 70 degrees and rainy for a week is far more dangerous than 32 degrees for 5 hours in the middle of the night.
Sure.
So I've in 40 years of working outdoors, I have never dealt with a winter like this. It was weeks and weeks and weeks of rain and cloud cover and, middle temperatures. So I wasn't, my system has never been tested like that. So I wasn't sure. So it was a nail biter, having everything covered for, a week to 10 days at a time, being unable to look under the plastic to see how things are going, because otherwise you flood it with cold air and then there's no way to get it back up because there's no sun. So we just had to cover and hope that all the different redundancies we have for inclement weather worked. So because it's not as simple. Our system is not as simple as just having, a box with some sticks and a hide box in it and then cover it with plastic. Our enclosures have, inside them, they each have a mini bunker that the animals can get into that are, shored up. We use bags of mulch unopened as insulation over the bunkers. And so plus they have, deep substrate. There's all these different things that are in there. So if they want to get away, they can get away. They have options, lots of options. And thankfully it worked. It worked better than I thought, because this week is one of the first really warm weeks. So we've been able to peel back like Heather's out there right now, checking on all the skinks and stuff. And
nice.
Everything looks good. She just brought in some to show me, and they're huge and perfect. Right. And everything looks good. So it works.
Nice.
Yeah, that's
awesome.
Really, it's super cool to hear that kind of thing. And what the reason I wanted to ask you about it and bring it up, like to kind of start out the conversation, is because I think one of the things that I've always admired or respected about the way you seem to approach this stuff is you seem like you have a willingness to take risks and kind of deal with a little bit of ambiguity for a little while. And I think that something that I feel like, at least from my vantage point, seems really, really common is I think a lot of folks in herpetoculture want an answer, and they don't want to deal with the potential risk of trying something new, and or they're not comfortable with a little bit of ambiguity. Like, this might be good, this might not be good, this might not be the right thing. And I think it makes some folks a little uncomfortable. And so I guess it's a two-part question, which would be, how do you agree with that assessment? Do you feel like that's accurate? And then secondarily, how do you, like, what's that like for you cognitively? Are you like sitting there and biting your nails all winter? Or is it like more of like we'll just see what happens, Like, what's going on in your brain when that's going on,
Well, to the last part, it's a little bit of both. It usually is the first couple of days I'm a little bit anxiety riddled. And then by the third or fourth day, I'm like, fuck it, everything's going to be fine. The idea, everything is ambiguous. There are no real, I have yet to see anything that is an unassailable fact. Every fact, none of them are actually hard, fast rules. They're facts under certain circumstances, facts under certain situations. So it's kind of a false sense of security that I have this answer for this thing and it's always going to be this way. No, that's not how it works. And especially with like what we do, you're at the mercy of nature. Nature doesn't give a fuck what you think or how, or your idea of what is true and what is not true. It's going to do what it's going to do. And you have to be able to, kind of stand in front of that wave and let it hit you and go with it. Trying to control it is where, I see there is definitely a thing I've noticed over the years where people that I know have come in, they've followed the systems that the little, like the recipes that have been formulated to a degree. And then as soon as they do well with it for a while until they hit a problem that sort of throws a little monkey wrench in the recipe, and then they fall apart and they end up getting out because they're not used to being able to just, you got to roll with it and you got to be willing to change and take chances. And, and I personally, at this point, I like playing in the fringes of things. That's where the interesting stuff is. The other stuff that's already been largely figured out, that we have some basic guidelines. Like I said, I don't think anything is a hard fast. Yeah. I don't believe in any of these recipes. I think they all have pros and cons to them, but they're also not as foolproof as people tend to believe.
Right.
So, and at this point, I just, that's not interesting to me. What's interesting to me is, can I find a better way to do this, to produce better animals, to have the animals have a better quality of life that is more enjoyable for us to work with. That's why everything we do is different. I'm not saying it's better, but it's different. It's, I thought I lost you guys. Maybe not. You guys,
no, you're still, I think
Roy,
we're still there.
I think Phil is frozen.
We lost Phil. He's coming back.
There he is.
Oh, that scared the hell out of me for a second. I was like, oh my God. Every once in a while when I'm recording here from the shop, that'll happen. And then I'll get this little alert on Zoom that says your connection is unstable. I'm like, ow, I'm the only damn person on it. Anyway. Well, so I really like a lot of that, because speaking from personal experience, like I kind of have to force myself to tolerate certain levels of ambiguity in a way that makes me really, really uncomfortable. I mean, Ron, I call you probably once a quarter and I'm like, I don't know. I think everything's going to die. If something's fucked up, I need your help. What do I do? Like, it seems like it's around that where, it's like almost quarterly. I'll have like a panic and some reassurance, but even like right now. So for example, I'm still dealing with this weird thing happening with my uromastics where their tail scales are curling. And I thought that it's not all of them, but it's it's like 50% of them. Right. And, I thought maybe, you and I spoke about it and we thought maybe there's like a calcium problem. Maybe there's a vitamin problem. So I addressed a lot of these concerns. And I even implemented like every other day soaks in the event that maybe it's some bizarre humidity issue. And I still don't really think, I'm not really seeing any change. And if anything, there's a handful where it seems like it's almost getting worse in some way. And so there's this level of, and it's okay. I'm not freaking out about it. I'm kind of considering it like maybe this resembles pyramiding in tortoises in some regard, right? Where it's like, it might happen. And then once it's there, and there's nothing you can really do about it. And so like, maybe I just haven't caught it in time with some of them before that issue presents itself, or maybe like, who knows? But the reality is the animals are in fucking great form in every other way, shape, and form, and they're producing well. I mean, they're active, alert, grumpy little bastards. So it's not something it's not pressing. It's not like a pressing concern.
Yeah.
But I don't deal with that very well. Like I'm sitting there looking and it's just because it just stares me in the face every day. And it's like, hey buddy, you're missing something, you big idiot. And you're like, what is this? And so so in some ways,
there always has to be something.
Yeah, there's got to be something, right? And so in some ways it's like there are situations in which you're forced into ambiguity because the other option would be to be like, I'm doing something wrong, forget it, I'm getting out of Euros altogether. And that's just not going to happen, right? So for more than one reason. But so I always like to kind of try to pry into other people and see how their mind is working on that kind of thing. Because, I think with time and with a little more experience, I think dealing with uncertainty and different kinds of adversity can become a little bit easier, because it's like, I've done it before, like not me specifically, but, a person could say, well, I remember these things that happened and I got through that, and
Yeah.
So I think that can be easier, but it's, I don't think it's always obvious. And I think, especially like right now in this time, and by this time, I mean, what appears to be sort of like an anomalous downtrend in the sort of herpetoculture market overall, I think it's just another way for people to bail. They're like, things aren't going very well, and I've hit this weird little wall with some of my keeping, or hit this little point in my experience that makes me a little uncomfortable. Screw it, I'm out.
Yeah.
And so it just feels apt, and it was something I wanted to bring up because it's intriguing to me. Roy, what do you think about that?
I mean, I feel like, I don't know, I appreciate just this whole emphasis and imperative on adaptability and kind of flexibility within herpetoculture, because this is something that I feel consistently confronted by, is just how prescriptive a lot of it is. A lot of the kind of standard approaches, it's like Ron said, it's like, here's the recipe. And it's like, well, what do you do when the recipe doesn't suit your context, and it's so often context dependent. And, I mean, even for myself, it's like, even having moved a couple times, with animals, it's like, okay, now I'm relearning this, how to have everything set up in this new location. It's like, I'm still in the same general bioregion. It's like, not like I moved across the country, but it's like, there are different quirks to this aspect or slope, that I'm working with on this land, and how it impacts my building and all of that. And so I think that, if there's anything about it, it's like, it really emphasizes this importance of critical thinking skills within herpetoculture. And I feel like the people that really tend to have longevity within herpetoculture are able to do that. Well, I think of like Bert Langerwerf, it was like, he was good at critical thinking and problem solving with working with the constraints that he had, and making it work for him.
Yeah.
And it didn't always look one way. It's like, if you look through his stuff, he had a whole bunch of different systems and different techniques for different animals and different taxa. And I think that's cool. It's also part of what I feel like I'm trying to kind of encourage in this whole, like, the webinars that we're doing with Happy Dragons and everything, is encouraging people, like, this is how you can think critically within your own context to then provide for your animal and do it yourself, rather than relying solely on, care sheets and stuff like that. It's just never complete.
Yeah, for sure. Well, with that in mind, that brings me to the next thing I wanted to ask you about, Ron, which is you. I feel like when I think of you, I think of there's an element of like, oh yeah, that's totally Ron. But then I also think about you, and I think of this person who seems so willing to change all the time. Like you seem highly open-minded to new projects, new endeavors, new challenges. And so I'd be curious to hear from your perspective what the last year has looked like for you in terms of what you've changed and why, and then what's coming, what's new, like what's on the horizon for you and why.
Yeah, I mean, if you look back at my career, that's what it is, right? I do something for 4 or 5 years and then hit a point to where, it's actually starting to make money. And then I'm just like, okay, fuck this. I'm done with this now. I'm moving on to the next thing. And then I develop something else. And then it just keeps going on and on.
Yeah.
That's part of that, is because for me, really the fun part is figuring it out, getting it to a point, so a lot of the projects I've done were not things that I necessarily was like really into. It was more like, oh, nobody's doing this, and this is kind of cool. And, it's like new ground. So again, it's playing in the fringes. So I'm going to go off like that's how the Anole thing got started. When I started that in 2013, nobody was really doing it, at least in the US, and certainly nobody was doing it on a commercial scale at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking at that going, oh, this is kind of cool. There's all these different things, and I've got a long history with these things. I know them well. But was it something that I got out of bed every morning and was like, yeah, I'm going to go play with the Knolls today? No, not really. It was like, okay, I'm going to mine some new territory and create a new little niche here, and maybe people will dig it, maybe they won't. Luckily they did. So now with that project, I recently, a couple months ago, I guess it's been like 6 months, I sold the entire Knoll project except for a group of Podior and a group of Ludigolaris to this guy David Eldian at I forget the name of his company right now, but
Eclectic
anyway,
Reptile.
Eclectic. So he came out and he bought them all, the entire thing, and that was to give us money for the next thing. And so the next thing that I'm doing now is something that I actually really care about, something that I've always, really been into. I just never did it for a variety of reasons. One, because it's difficult, and it's risky. But I think I've already come a long way in the year, and that's the Northern Emerald tree boas. So we went out and we got this very, very expensive new one, possible mutation called a pixel that was captured in Suriname. So we got that. We brought it in. We named it the Notochondro because people thought it was a biak and kept saying, "Oh, that's a weird biak." And I'm like, "No, dude, that's an emerald tree boa." But so that thing is like in a shrine in my garage where it has and then I changed the entire garage. I ended up gutting it. I turned it into an oven, and then it has we built this overhead rain system that we can roll the emeralds outside and actually fully simulate rain events whenever I want to.
Cool.
So yeah, we've done a lot with that. So that's really, for me, that's probably something that I'm not going to stop doing. That's something. I mean, I get up every morning and go out there and look at them. So
yeah.
So I'm working on those in chondros. And then Heather's working on the blue tongues. She's hyper focused on that. And this will be a pretty big year, I think, as for us with that. And the other lizards that she does. But again, that's playing in the fringes to a degree. And in the process over the last year, I've picked up a bunch of other unusual northern emeralds that were captured down in Suriname and Guyana. So I've got probably 20 years worth of work to do just with what I have here, and that's if we don't acquire any more.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Do you? Is it like just someone that in Suriname who's like, hey, look at this weird? I mean, obviously, I'm not asking you to say exactly.
No. I got you. No, I mean, I've got a 40-year history with almost all. Damn it. I have a 40-year history with most of the importers. A lot of almost all the Florida ones, and then some other ones. So, I mean, I can get stuff if it shows up. I have a good chance of being able to get it. And so that's helped me out a lot. And that's another reason why I kind of went in that direction. One, I ended up setting up like 50 adult imported emeralds, but I wanted a wide gene pool of totally varied wild caught stuff. So I don't have to worry about it. There's never going to be a thought of having to worry about inbreeding or anything at least in the near term.
Yeah.
And I've got enough genetic diversity here to last me probably forever, as long as I'm.
Oh yeah.
So there was a few reasons for that. And I also picked up a few captive bred ones because I wanted to hedge my bets in case I couldn't get the wild caught ones established. And turned out they were way easier to establish than I had anticipated. So we built them big cages and they go outside and.
Yeah. Do you think that they're them being easier to establish than you expected is do you think that's mostly related to the way you set them up and put them together? I mean, I always feel like that, because I feel like that's common. You'll hear that sort of trope from people about like, oh, these guys are notoriously difficult to establish, but then you get that one, handful of random individuals who are like, oh yeah, no, they just take right off when you set them up right. Do you feel like that's the case for this?
Yeah, I think in emeralds, you hear a lot about, oh, the first thing you need to do is medicate them. They shoot them up with all kinds of toxic chemicals and then wonder why they roll over dead in a couple of weeks. And so I've established, I couldn't even tell you how many species that I've bred over the last 40 years or so that I've established from wild caughts. And I always have the same protocol. I bring them in, I set them up in large outdoor, enclosures with everything that I think they would need to provide security and temperature and everything they need. And then I do this thing that a lot of people don't do, and that's I leave them the fuck alone.
Yeah, yeah.
And I let them get accustomed to the new setup and the new environment and the changes. And I just supply fresh food and fresh water, but I do not fuck with them. I don't handle them. I don't shoot them with anything. I just let it go. And 9 times out of 10, that has worked brilliantly. Their own immune systems will take care of anything they have. I mean, everything, all of your captive bred stuff has parasites. It doesn't matter. If you're feeding crickets, you're loading your animals with, commercially bred crickets carry worms and stuff. I mean, it just, everything does. It's unavoidable. So the idea that everything in the wild is some sickly, parasite infested, disease bomb is honestly fucking stupid. Go outside and look at all the animals in your yard. Are there dead animals all over your yard or in your neighborhood? The answer to that is no.
Right.
It's just silly.
Yeah.
It's, and it's like the whole cohab thing. It's another silly trope of this. I mean, now let me back that up just a bit, because I know Phil's already depending on the species, depending on its, its thing.
Bring out the steel cage.
Well, when I say cohabbing, though, I'm talking about, like we have a lot of setups that are like zoo type setups where it's a very large enclosure, outdoor enclosure, and we'll have giant anoles that live in the upper ends of it, and we'll have maybe a pair of blue tongues that live on the floor, and then we have some of and people freak out about that. Oh my God, one's from Indonesia, one's from South America, you can't put it together. Get out of here. Zoos have been doing it the entire time. They have very intricate, nice setups where you can go, and sometimes you'll see a Burmese python and some dart frogs, and I'm just kind of throwing shit out there, but I mean, they do that kind of stuff, and it works well. And if you're able to do it, it's fun. It's really cool, and it's probably better for the animals, to be honest, rather than in some little sterile container.
Yeah.
So,
right.
But again, that's just a luxury that I have because I live in Florida and I can have these big outdoor enclosures and do that, and if you live in a place like that, then grats you got the luxury too. Yeah. So I'm not, we also use, we have racks that we use when we need to. We have, tub systems, indoor tub systems that we use when we need to. They're all tools to do a job. And sometimes they're better for the animals, and sometimes, they're not so good and you can do something else. But
right.
Again, it's all ambiguous, right? It's all, subjective and I don't know where I'm going with this, but the way I view it is I don't let myself fall into one of these, very rigid ideological categories, right? I keep everything totally agnostic. I try not to formulate beliefs of any sort. And when I do find myself formulating beliefs, I do my best to rip them out of me, because that's how you stifle progress. Once you formulate a belief, then that's it. You'll stop thinking about it. You'll stop considering any other options, and you'll forge ahead basically blind to other potentialities, I think. So I feel like doing your best to maintain, to remain agnostic about things really allows you to adapt. You don't get
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, it's really about not marrying yourself to an outcome. I think that's how all of us get in trouble. I mean, I personally took me a long time to learn to not do that. I probably wasn't until I was well into my 40s where I was able to get to a point where I realized, oh man, I'm driving myself crazy because I'm married to some outcome that I'm trying to force into existence, when the reality is I really am not doing anything but fucking myself here. And if I just let it go, and if it happens, it happens. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. And something else will come, up. Like there's always new things coming up.
Yeah. I heard a long time ago, someone I respect a lot, I heard him say, and I'm going to kind of paraphrase it a little bit, but he basically said something to the effect of, seek the truth, but beware those who claim to have found it.
Mm-hmm.
And from that time forward, I remember feeling like a kind of like an internal, like lurch that I'd feel when someone would come to me with a sense of certainty that was really, really, like rigid, like certainty makes me uncomfortable. And I think part of why is because doubt is an expression of humility, like, it's like, I don't know, like, like saying, yeah, I can see why that might be, but I also have my doubts I think it can be interpreted as the reverse, where it's like, well, you think you know better, or you think you know more. And it's like, no. I'm saying, like, it's actually the opposite of that. It's an expression of, I clearly don't know. I'm not I don't have all the answers. I don't have the, all the perfect insight. And it would feel arrogant of me to have a sense of certainty around. I mean, even the thing that I talk about all the time, which is, you just brought it up, the cohab thing, I obviously mine's maybe a little like narrow and specific, but every single year I try to find a way to get Euros to tolerate one another here in my space, because there's no way I have it right. Like, I know people who keep them together, like a good friend of mine, Nick Alexander, he's another Euro breeder, does a great job, and he does good stuff. And he insists on cohabitation, and I think it gets him into trouble sometimes, but he also has great success. He does a great job. He's produces plenty of stuff and has beautiful animals, and he's doing wonderful work. So, like, clearly there's like a methodology somewhere, or a context in the way he's managing things that could be technically transported here. And I just have to figure out where it is. But it's not necessarily that I want to do things that way, but it's just anyway, that was a bit of a tangent, just to say that, like, certainty makes me really, really uncomfortable. I'm not ever like when someone comes at me with a very rigid, like, this is how it is, and if you're not on board with that, then you're not paying attention. It's like, well, I don't think that's accurate. I think there's a lot more flex. There's a lot more wiggle room in it, and it doesn't involve outright denial of anything either. It's just okay, but, and it's like a more of a yes and rather than a yes but. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean the certainty thing is ridiculous, right? As soon as somebody does that, as soon as I hear somebody that's incredibly certain about something, I'm already done with them. I'm just there. Anything they say after this is invalid. I don't care what you have to say, because there is no certainty, just like there is no security. We all kind of toil around underneath this illusion that we have either or both of those things. But the truth is, you have no security at all. Tomorrow, the sun could lob out a blob of plasma that that burns the atmosphere off this planet, and we're all fucking dead. And it's probably happened before. Yeah. And so you have no security at all there, and God knows what else is out in the fucking, in space that wipes out planets. There's got to be reasons why there's not a lot of life all over the place, because life seems to be, at least if you go by this one, seems to be commonplace. It's probably springs up all over the place, but it gets annihilated by who knows? Yeah. We only have a couple hundred years of any sort of knowledge of space. And really, we only have the last, like 50 or 100 years where we've really gotten more stuff. That's a grain of sand on a beach, right? In the the grand scheme of things. It's just our time scales are so small and so fine, but we arrogantly think we know shit. We don't know nothing. We don't even know what more than likely the sun is probably our greatest enemy and is also our greatest friend, because it usually is a case where, there's a duality to everything. Usually the thing that brings life also brings death. I mean, the ocean is a good example of that.
Yeah.
So,
right.
There's just, it's just ridiculous. So once you get that kind of, stuff out into your, where you kind of get away from the illusion as best you can of security, the illusion of certainty, then a lot of things open. And so it allows you to stop marrying yourself to an outcome and be much more willing to take chances. And if you're more willing to take chances, then you're going to get farther ahead than the guy that doesn't. If you play it safe, you can maintain something for an extended period of time, but you'll maintain it, and that's about it. And I don't know, that's boring to me. So I've taken a lot of chances, and I've been punched in the face a few times by the chances I've taken. It knocked me on my ass, but sometimes, every once in a while, I get a win out of it. And so
there's no better lesson sometimes than getting knocked out.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I appreciate the times I've been knocked on my ass just as much as and probably more so than I appreciate the things where I won, because I learned a lot from being, when you're faced with losing your house and your whole thing is collapsing and all this shit, man, you learn a lot of lessons at that point, that you wouldn't have learned unless, the universe decided to knock you down. So at least in my case.
Roy, please do stop if you want to chime in, and I'm just like as usual, blazing past and monopolizing the conversation, but there's so much here that
it's good.
I really enjoy talking about. And I want to ask what feels like a sort of peripherally related question, which and granted, because of the conversation we just had around being allergic to certainty, I understand that the answer is probably going to be both, right? But I like to wonder about this topic, like which is more important, consistency or adaptability? And because I think all of us can think of individuals who have success in with either or both realms, right? We can all think of someone who is both adaptable and consistent. We can all think of people who are highly adaptable, and we can think of people who are highly consistent, but maybe not both all the time, right? And part of the reason I wonder about this is twofold. One is because I feel like it's related to sort of like the disappearance of certain herpetofauna in captivity, right? So like a prime example of this is those Pseudocordylus subviritus, right? So when they came in last year, I know I got some. Ron, I know you guys got some. There's a handful of other folks who got some, and then eventually I got a couple from you when you moved on from that project, and I still have them here. I'm actually super psyched on them because they're just now hitting a size where one of them out of the 6 looks like a male, which is hilarious. Crazy odds there, but they're all getting big. They're starting to look really nice. They're all starting to get a little color. But the number of people who I saw who posted about buying those compared to the number of people who still have them is totally remarkable. Like it's absolutely insignificant, in terms of the number of people who still have them compared to the number who bought. And I think that that's related to the question of consistency versus adaptability, because I'm sure that some people don't have them because the consistency with them was a problem. And some people don't have them because they adapted to a change that's going on for them with something that's like a project that's more important, maybe a little bit bigger, what have you, right? Which is fair. I've done that before with lots of things, and it's not, I'm not making a judgment call. It's just it's a statement about the way things work, right? And then secondarily, or additionally, I think there's another question here, which is like, that feels related, which is that, sometimes, there's this experience. We all gain so much experience from sticking with a single project or sticking with something for a very, very long time. And there's so much you can learn from a level of consistency. But there's also I've been thinking a lot about innovation through ignorance, and about the ways that certain individuals will come in, you see in other fields, these innovations happen by accident, right? It was like an engineer at 3M who needed to find a way to leave notes for himself all over the company. And he put a very
Post-it
light
note.
adhesive on the back of the sticky note, and it creates this crazy innovation, right? And it's such a minor change, but that led to like a real sea change in the way people think about leaving notes before the advancement of a phone, right? So, and I think about seeing that in herpetoculture in some ways, like I mean, all the time I think about people who it's like, well, I've seen people innovate because they didn't know any better. And it's like they weren't so loaded down with preconceptions about the way something should or shouldn't be done, And so I don't know, maybe this isn't a question. It's just stuff that's been floating around in my mind. And so, I'm just curious for both of you, like what's stuff that comes to mind for you guys with regard to that?
Well, I mean, that's part of maintaining agnosticism, right? In everything you think, because you're not allowing you're listening to all the information, but you're not allowing them to form beliefs where then that kind of controls what you do next. When you take everything in and just look at it as this kind of, amorphous blob of information and go, okay, well, this seems to be relevant to my situation and what I'm trying to do, but you never marry yourself to it. You never get to the point where you're just like, okay, this is the fact, and I can't. So obviously, a fact is you can't really deviate from that if it's a hard fact. So you just never allow that to, and that kind of maintains sort of a realm of ignorance, even though you are still you're still absorbing all this information. You're just not. It's just kind of there in front of you, and it's like a puzzle. I'll take this piece out of here and this piece out of there. That's kind of the way I see it, and I totally agree. If you look at most innovation, that's where it comes from, right? This guy figured out this thing because he didn't know that it wasn't supposed to be that way.
Right.
And like again, we're sort of we're the crown princes of hubris, the humans as a species, right? We think we know shit, and
I love that.
It's ridiculous. It's just nonsense. It's not true. We have little tiny pieces of the puzzle, but we don't even know. We can't even, describe. We don't even know for sure basic, common things like consciousness. Nobody can prove. Nobody really understands that. So if you don't even understand the base things, and look at quantum physics, that's a mind fuck and a half. And there's all this stuff. We don't know shit about anything. So it's better to just kind of go with it. And that is I think if you're able to do that, I think we'll see a lot more people that are willing to push this thing forward in a positive direction. So less about, I'm going to follow this guy. We get people that do that. They come out here and they see what we're doing, and then they try to copy it, and then they send me photos of what they tried to do, and I'm looking at it like, oh man, they didn't understand. They have it wrong as far as the way they didn't understand why we do certain things the way we do. There's all these different layers to it that I can't even most of the time verbalize, because it's just kind of automatic. It's just like we walk by enclosures and, I'll catch something or Heather will catch something you just kind of autopilot. You just know it's one of those things where you do it long enough. You just have this, it's kind of like this feeling thing where you're just, oh, something's off. And then, or that lizard is not sitting in this place that it usually sits. Why is that happening? So maybe I ought to check. Sometimes you find out that the snake got in there and there's a corn snake in its hide box, and that's why it's not going in the hide box. It's things like that. Yeah. So sometimes you come out there and you find a headless corn snake that a bearded dragon bit the head off of. So
have you guys found that? Is that happening?
Oh yeah, that hasn't happened at this place, but back when I lived in Lake Placid, it used to happen a lot.
That's unbelievably fun.
Dude, there were so many corn snakes on that property that every year after hibernation, when I would check on the bearded dragons and pull their hide boxes apart, there were almost always corn snakes in at least 30% of them every year. And some of them were big, and the dragon would be curled up right next to the corn snake. Both of them were fine.
Oh man.
Yeah, it was pretty.
Oh my God.
That was a cool place.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
That's kind of cool. It's funny.
It tells you your systems are herp approved.
Yeah, exactly.
For
They're
real.
fighting to get in.
Yeah. It's funny what you were saying, because, you know, we have Brendan here. He's my buddy who's helps me out here a lot. He's great, wonderful guy. He's hobbling around because he broke his leg and is just now making his way back to the shop. But he and I will have conversations like this because we'll be walking around and he'll be like, well, what do you want me to do today? You know, like, what do you want me to work on? And I'll have to like take a couple of laps and I kind of like walk around and I'll be like, well, why don't we go ahead and do this? And he'll ask, which is the right question for him. He'll say, well, why do, you know, not in a challenging way, but in like, okay, why are we doing that? Why do you want me to do it that way? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what to tell you. It just seems like the thing to do, you know? And so it's good in both ways, because sometimes he'll ask me why, and I'll rethink why I'm even doing it in the first place. And I'll be like, oh, maybe we don't have to do that. Or what do you think? Like, what would you do, you dork, young person? Man, he's so tolerant. It's great. And then sometimes it'll actually go the other direction. It'll kind of force me to try to articulate to him why something has to be done that way, or why I want it done that way, you know, which is a great exercise. It reminds me so much of teaching jujitsu, because there's things you do and you're like, I don't know why I do it that way. And you have to find a way to articulate it to these people who don't know anything about what they're supposed to be doing. And you're like, well, you know, it's a great introspective device, you know? Yeah. So, and actually that also brings me to another topic too, which is, I guess there's a few ways to sort of jump in on this one, but like, things like hero worship and like resistance to change inside herpetoculture, which is such a unique thing to me. And I think part of the reason I started thinking about this, recently anyway, and I should say, not for any negative reasons, but, you know, because of Brian Barczyk's passing, right? And I have nothing. I have only good things to say about the guy. Like, and I know the way he passed was rough, and that's a hard way to go about it. Like, I never had any interactions outside of one single Instagram exchange, and it was him reaching out to me to say, hey, like, I love your Euros. You're doing a great job. That was the extent of any interaction I had with Brian.
Right.
But Roy and I have actually been discussing this a little bit since his passing, because we've seen such a bizarre set of reactions in the community around that, right? Everything that ranges from, like, you know, I don't want to say anybody was like hero worshiping in any regard, but I mean, that does happen in herpetoculture. I don't want to say it happened with him in particular, but there was some of that. But then everything from that to like people posting memes of like him being lowered into a grave in a tub.
I saw that.
And you're just like, what the fuck? Like, why would you do this? You know, like, this is a person. This is a person who was like living his life, who clearly had good intentions. You know what I mean? And like, you know, you mean to tell me that there's, you know, regardless of what you think about anything he did, I don't know anybody in the world who never made an error or two. You know what I mean? And so to see kind of both ends of that, and then I think there's another layer to this, which is like, I could totally understand people having one-on-one conversations that maybe touched on someone's life and what they thought about them, but I cannot even imagine taking the next step to say, this has to be put out to millions of people on the internet. Like, let me go ahead and project this out into the world. It seems totally naive, short-sighted, self-important. I mean, the whole thing, I don't know. And I'm just curious, like Roy, and some of that was Roy, you know, like Roy said that, you know, he and I were talking about it. He put it way better than I could, which was, you know, that self-important part of it was, and I felt like that was really astute. So I'm not trying to take words out of your mouth, Roy, but, you know, I don't know.
It's fine, man.
So, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I'm curious to hear Ron's thoughts on this whole thing. I can wait to do a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so a couple things. One, I knew the guy in a professional capacity for about 40 years or so. I've known him since, you know, he was there at the very beginning. Him and I, we didn't hang out, you know, we weren't like super close. He's been here a couple times. And, you know, when he was getting a few years ago, like 8 or 10 years ago, when he had this group of internet trolls that were fucking with him pretty hard. I reached out to him and I'm like, look, dude, you're going about this wrong, trying to appease them, or to placate them is not the way to go here with these. I mean, I've been a hardcore gamer my whole life. I'm very involved in that whole thing. I know exactly how to deal with those motherfuckers. So, but he didn't take my advice anyway, because he was a nice guy and he wanted people to like him, and he cared about that. So that can screw you up if you don't know how to deal with, the people that you're never gonna, they're never gonna like you. They dislike you for whatever reason. Mostly that's some projection of them, of their own self-hate they're projecting onto the victim, I guess you could say, of that, or the recipient. But anyway, I thought personally, I never really watched the show, but I also never watched Steve Irwin's show either. It wasn't my thing. I just thought it was cringy. And Brian's was, it just wasn't my thing. It was like, I don't really watch any of those, the kind of populist YouTube guys. I watch stuff like this show, stuff that's more, information focused, deeper dives and stuff like that. I have no interest in like the pop thing. I got through that a long time ago. That's, if you're new, great, but whatever. So yeah, I mean, so I've basically been off social media back in October. I deleted it all off my phone. I haven't opened Facebook. Most people can't even get a hold of me on my phone. I just leave it off in the room. And I do that most of the winter because I just need to get the fuck away, because over time I found that if you keep yourself immersed in the community, it starts to affect the way you think about things. Yeah. And so for me, I start making bad decisions near the end of it. I'm like, oh, because, people are telling me all this cool stuff, and it starts to seep in, and it does affect you. Even if you're cognizant of the fact that it affects you, it still fucks you up. So a long time ago, I discovered I need 5-6 months off from this shit. So I just fucking drop out, disappear. Then I pop back up in the spring again. And I only really pop back up in the spring because I got to keep my name out there, keep, promoting what we do. So I can always, people know that we're doing stuff. So people come to buy stuff so we can actually eat, and pay bills and stuff like that.
Right.
So that's why I do that. But, so I was kind of staying away from this. But Heather was still active, and she would show me, stuff. And, there were some people that posted like some sincere, honest, things, but I saw some of those memes with the casket in the box, which seriously, man, that's I'm not going to say what I think about people that do that here. And then on the flip side, I saw a lot of people making his death about them. It was like this, this kind of weird capitalizing on the guy's death, where they were using it as a vehicle to promote themselves. I was like, that's fucking sick too. Can we just respect the fact, it's one thing, if somebody even asked me why I didn't go out and make a statement. I'm like, what the fuck? Why would I make a statement? I knew the guy fucking guy died. That's about that he died. I'm not going to go up there and make it about me, make some fucking statement. What kind of stupid shit is that? Yeah. So, I don't know, man. People are just fucking weird and dumb. And I mean, we're so egocentric, and it's only gotten worse because of the advent of the fucking phone. Everybody can have a YouTube channel. Everybody can be on TV. Basically everybody can be on TV now. And there's a lot of people that probably shouldn't be on TV. But hey, that's freedom, man. Freedom is, the freedom to be a dumbass, the freedom to be the piece of shit, the freedom to do whatever. But yeah, that whole thing, like I said, I knew the guy personally. He was a very nice guy.
Yeah.
He was genuinely a nice guy. He really did care about people and stuff like that. He was also, you know, that was his thing that he built. That show wouldn't have been as popular, I don't think. I mean, it's a very popular show, and it was popular because the average person, that's what they want to see. And so he was very successful in that regard. I don't think there's any other reptile YouTubers that come close to what that guy was doing. So I don't know. And people hold up Steve Irwin as some bastion of, but I don't really see it that way. I see him basically the same way I saw Brian. I thought he was definitely a guy that cared about what he does. He had his own, he was more on the conservation, bent of it, but he did plenty of cringy shit too. There were videos of him, getting bitten in the nose by a bearded dragon. He'd stick his face in a king, everybody, that's part of, I mean, what we consider, if you're really serious about this, what we consider cringy, most people consider cool.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a perspective thing. It's my problem that I view, the popular YouTube thing as cringy, because I wouldn't fucking do that. I'm not going to go on but that's my personal hang up.
Well, but it also, I think part of what makes it cringy is that there are aspects of that behavior that feel deeply inauthentic. And I think if you're cued in, I feel like in some ways we're looking for that. We're looking for a level of authenticity because of the level of seriousness and like the level of thought that we put into what we do.
Yeah.
And again, if I'm going to make another analogy to like say art or jiu-jitsu, art first, Thomas Kincaid, he's the painter of light, like this famous, he probably had more people who knew who his paintings and his work than Norman Rockwell. He made for a time, he was the most lucrative painter in all of art history, just hundreds of millions of dollars for these just god awful, beautifully painted, god awful cabins in the woods with snow and light pouring out from the center, and the light. I mean, I'm sure you guys know the work, right? And and when you're devoted to a craft of art making, especially something like drawing and painting, and you're trying to infuse what you're doing with something of real meaning, not something that is commercial or what feels inauthentic to you, it gets irritating. You look at Thomas Kincaid and you're like, $200 million? Are you serious? Give me one. Give me one, damn it. Like, are you crazy? Like, nothing about what he's up to is anywhere near as introspective as this or as other artists that you know, who you feel like this person's unbelievable. And it's kind of the same. That's why we're interested in McDojo stuff, right? Like McDojo life on Instagram. We love seeing people trying to use chi and then they get punched in the face. You're like, hey, that didn't work, buddy. And there's the reason it's cringe is because there's something fake about it. Now, I'm not trying to suggest that anything that Steve or Brian did was fake. So to speak. It doesn't, sometimes that stuff that feels cringy just doesn't align with the values of what you're bringing to the table in terms of herpetoculture. So you're like, it's not really my scene, but and it sends like that kind of thing. It's like Bob Ross too. Bob Ross was great, kind of cringy. I loved what he did, but he also he spawned this entire generation of people who create the same formulaic landscape paintings that he did. And it gives a false sense of what you're up to. There's a lot that happened in between when Bob Ross was born and when he started making those shows. But then you have people who skip right to the end and they're just doing what he did on the show, and there's all this meat that happened in between, and it gets hard, it's hard to cover all that ground in some way, which is what you were saying earlier, Ron, where you would say people would come and visit your guys' spot. They would see something that you're up to. They would try to replicate it in their space, and they'd send you pictures. And it's like, dude, you flew right past the why and just got to what you thought was the visual end product.
Correct.
And so, it doesn't, again, I don't mean this in a judgmental way, because I've done it too. I've done it dozens of times. Because you just want to try it. You want to say, like I just got into fly fishing recently and I'm doing that right now. Like I'm trying to skip to the end, but there's so much ground I have to cover in terms of learning before I can actually utilize some of these methods and techniques effectively in a way that means something. So yeah, I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, there's a writer I admire named Martin Prechtel, and he says, you can't start where you ain't.
Right.
Which I love. It's one of my favorite quotes. You can't start where you ain't. Because so often we want to bypass the process and arrive at the outcome, but the process is what makes you worthy of the outcome. And, I think that that's present in everything, and definitely present in herpetoculture. I feel like with the whole thing with Brian, it's interesting because I didn't have a personal relationship with him at all. I never engaged with his content at all. Apart from like seeing like passing things, scrolling and stuff like that occasionally. I did grow up in the Steve Irwin era, and as a kid loved watching Steve Irwin because, and looking back, it's like, yeah, when I was a kid, now I think if I was watching that content, I would probably have a really different feeling about it in a lot of ways. I can still look back on it fondly and appreciate what it did for me. And I think that I have a similar kind of interpretation of Brian's, legacy in that sense of like, he did a lot to encourage and invigorate and stoke interest in a lot of young people who encountered his content, in this moment of like emerging this new media, right? This of YouTube and everything. And he was kind of like the first reptile, geek to really exploit that resource and that new medium to, make a life for himself and his family. And, of course, I'm sure there's tons of stuff that he did that I would disagree with or whatever in terms of my own ethics and all of that. But I think that that's true for just about everybody. And my impression also was that he was, especially in the latter, last 5 to 10 years, he was making strides to like improve his welfare and his husbandry, emphasize a different side of what he was doing, moving away from like the endless aisles of racks to like, check out this like this reptarium that I've made, which, and a lot of that too, I think was a shift away from like breeding to like education and like encouraging the community in a way as his kind of bread and butter. It went kind of from like, I need to produce this many snakes a year to feed my bottom line to like, I need to engage this many people, through social media per month to meet my bottom line. That
takes a lot of courage, to do that on that scale.
Oh, yeah.
You have that big of a following, you have that much riding on it. That takes a lot of courage to do that. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Sure. And like, there's plenty in that was admirable. And, I've never heard anyone who knew him personally say like, that he was a bad guy, or anything like that, or that he didn't actually care about reptiles or anything, or that it was some kind of fraud, like no one's ever said that, and again, I'm not trying to litigate his record in any way. Like I think it's in poor taste to do so. And I think that the folks who are making memes about his, tragic passing are classless to say the least. So, but I think that one thing that like does come up for me in this whole conversation is like this concept of like accountability within herpetoculture, and something like this is something that Phil and I talk about occasionally. And I've talked with other people and I've heard people say like, there's no such thing as accountability within herpetoculture at this stage, or that like, it's just starting to reach a stage of like, kind of mainstream oversight where accountability is like creeping in in a way that it didn't for a long time, because it was like those of us who are doing herpetoculture, we're the weirdos off in the margins. We were happily flying under the radar of everything. And I feel like that's starting to shift in this moment. I'm curious, Ron, if like just from your perspective and your tenure of, seeing herpetoculture on a really different time horizon than I have, like, how do you perceive all of that? And yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question, Roy.
I mean, look, I can recall a whole bunch of people that I have had interactions with in this business since I started in like the late 1980s or so. There have been a lot of very good people that I became friends with and had a lot of respect for, and there were a few that were total pieces of shit. And there, the bad apples it works itself out. I know a lot of people don't believe that. They'll point to a random outlier that's managed to fly under the radar, or that they perceive to be bad, but is not really, it's more perception than reality. I mean, if they were really as bad as a lot of people perceive them to be, then it would have fixed itself. I mean, these things do have a way to tend to they tend to work themselves out. I mean, so to me, nothing's changed in that regard. The bad apples tend not to last. Sometimes the good apples don't last either. But it's not something I really hope too much. I mean, if I don't like you, I won't deal with you. Yeah. You'll never get to fucking speak to me. So, and there are only a handful of people like that I can think of. And actually, really, it's probably down to only one or two these days. But I also have a relationship with some people that routinely get shit on, that I know are not what people are, because I've known these people personally forever. Yeah, sure. They, maybe they'll send out, their employees will ship out something that shouldn't have been shipped, dumb shit like that happens, but there's no intention. As far as my interactions with them, never been anything like that. They've always been very positive, and if I've always had a problem, they've always immediately took care of me. Now people say, oh, well, that's because you're Ron St. Pierre, blah, blah. No, because I've seen them do this with other people. It has nothing to do with that. And matter of fact, a lot of these motherfuckers know that I'm pretty easy about shit like that. And so if anything, I would see maybe more of that, because I've had cases where people have sent me stuff that was crap, and I just fucking fixed it myself and didn't say anything. So, because in most of the situations, I look at it like, well, that animal will do better if I just get it outside, and rather than send it back and put it through this again, I'll just take the chance myself. And if it dies and I lose some money, who cares? But maybe I could save it. Maybe it'll do good. And it might end up being. So I don't know. I don't even know where I'm going with this. It's just live animals. There are uncertainty, and there's no security in it. And I've lost plenty of money. I've lost plenty of projects, over the years. Things have happened, but I don't go around and go on the internet and cry like a bitch that, somebody, did something. I'm not fucking doing that, because shit happens, and as long as it's not a habitual thing, I don't know, man. I just, but again, if somebody's habitually, not taking care of animals and sending out sick and dying animals, it does tend to fix itself. That's going to fix itself. The word will get out. Everybody will know. Yeah, they'll continue to trickle in, maybe, random sales of new people that they get, but eventually they'll dry that pool will dry up as more and more, and the people that keep you in business, honestly, more often than not, are the repeat people, the people that you make sure you take care of them. If you're good, they keep coming back. And so that's the people that keep you afloat. And so, I've always personally had, I am almost psychotic about the stuff that we send out. It has to, and Heather's way worse than I am about it. It has to be as perfect possible. We try to disclose any possible, thing about it that somebody might find objectionable, so they can make a decision before the animal ever even leaves. And everything has to be feeding. Everything has to be outwardly healthy and look good. But sometimes you can ship something that looks great. It's perfect. And it gets on the other end of the line, and either the stress of shipping had a negative effect, or that box got left in some, because you don't know what happens once it leaves you, right?
Right.
I mean, lots of, I can remember one year in 2000 and I think it was 2000 and yeah, it was the same year of 9/11. So that was 2001, right? Yeah. 2000. And Phil, your mic died. 2001. An entire week of shipments, all of the shipments died, and they were all arriving dead. And I was like, what the fuck? You know, I never had this problem. This is back when we were using Delta Airlines. And so I lost a ton of money. The bunch of animals died needlessly. And 2 years later, I never really knew what happened. And 2 years later, I was at Strictly, and Mike Van Oster and I were talking, and I found out that all of his shipments, a big portion of them that went through Atlanta that year, also died before they made it to their arrival. And then we found out that another South Florida reptile shipper had the same problem that week. It turns out, we found out after the fact, that Delta had an employee that was either terrified or did not like reptiles, and they were refusing to put the box shipments of reptiles inside the cargo area, so they left them out in the wintertime, just sitting out in the elements until they made it on the plane. And all this stuff, and the weather wasn't like, wasn't super cold. There was but it was cold enough that if they were in a box just sitting out there, and this was really before cryo packs and all that, where we used to just use heat packs if it was hot. But, shipping out of Florida, that's another thing. We ship to a lot of places and people want heat packs all the time. And I'm like, well, if I throw a heat pack in a box here and they leave it sitting on the conveyor belt to go into a plane for even 10 minutes and it's 86 degrees out here, that animal's dead. But if it goes through the process, and the box might be subjected to 40 or 50 degrees, that's not likely to kill that thing for a short period of time, right? No. Cold doesn't really kill stuff. People need to get this out of their head with it. Maybe extreme cold, but for the most part, especially nowadays when you're shipping, and FedEx has been pretty good about it. Those boxes are taken well care of, as far as you can. I mean, there's videos of idiot FedEx guys throwing boxes around and shit like that. That does happen, but for the most part, it's well taken care of. And so they're never subjected to anything extreme. But in those minutes, with a heat pack in a box that's leaving Florida where it's 85 degrees, and it's pretty much always like that, going to a place where it might experience 40 degrees for a couple hours at night, but most of that temperature swing where it's heading, it's like maybe 50s or 60s. That's totally non-lethal weather, right? They open a box, the dragon's a little cold or whatever reptile you're shipping, it's a little cold, and they freak out. Oh, it's cold. It's cold. Yep. That's better than it being roasted and dead.
Oh yeah.
And so
such a big pet peeve of mine.
It drives me nuts, dude. And
I know that people mean well.
Yes.
They'll say it like a dig. I'll be like, did he arrive okay? And they're like, yep, he was a little cold, but I'm like, it's okay. That's okay for him to be cold. It's good. You don't want him to be hot that whole time. Yeah. That's not how it goes. Anyway, sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. And I mean, anybody that's like all of us, we understand that, right? But it's, the new people that come in, or the non-serious herpers, all they know is hot, hot, hot. It has to be hot all the time.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people run lights at night, heat lights. I'm like, that's ridiculous. Yeah. Come on, just use some common sense. It's not.
If anything, it's dark in Australia or wherever.
And it gets cold.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean, we live in cities where we have we live in a little, our micro environment in human communities is much warmer than, the outer areas, where there's not much pavement, there's not many all those warm little buildings that we're all heating, as that air rushes over them, it's heating the air, and then the asphalt and all this. People don't understand any of that. Wow. So even in tropical places, the temperatures drop at night for the most part, for at least a significant portion of the year.
Right.
So it's just, I don't know, man.
Well, so I'd be curious to come back to just back up just a smidge to when we were talking about like accountability and reputation and stuff like this, because I wonder, you said, Ron, that the folks who are like the bad actors tend to get weeded out over time. And I'm wondering if that's a matter of scale, because I think if you're say like a larger scale producer or seller or what have you, and you develop a bad reputation, that gets around a lot more because there's more opportunity for that to get to more people who are going to be more vocal about it, right? But then I feel like I've known the same handful of people who have been in reptiles for as long or longer than I have, who, when I got in, it was well known that, people would say, like, watch out for that guy. He's kind of a shady so-and-so. And like, to this day, they're not large scale. They're not producing hundreds of stuff a year, or even, maybe they're producing 40 to 80 a year of whatever it is that they're selling. And they have enough, they're like present enough to catch attention and continue to get customers, but not so prominent that they get enough of the negative feedback to get pushed out. So I don't know. I'm just curious if that, and maybe it's just time, right? Maybe more time will weed out that sort of thing. I'm not sure, but I was just wondering if maybe there's like a scale component to what you were saying.
I mean, I'm sure that's the case as well. But again, though, I mean, nothing's going to be foolproof and 100%, right? You're always going to have, no matter what, you're not going to ever get rid of completely everything that kind of falls into the perfection thing, right? You can't ever have perfect, doesn't exist. So you're always going to have some bad people. You're always going to have some really good people. You're going to have a whole lot of people that are somewhere in the middle. I don't know. It's one of those, it can't be fixed, basically. I mean, it's impossible to fix it, right? If you just say you did get rid of the current crop of what we would consider bad actors, even then, what do you define a bad actor, right? How do you even go about defining that exactly to where you can just go ahead and wave a magic wand? So let's just say Phil has a magic wand shoved up his ass, and he can pull it out anytime he wants and wave it, and and make everybody bad go away, right? So how would you even decide that at that point? I mean, where's the lines? How do you draw it? And what stops somebody from deciding, oh, well, Phil's, breeding all these Uromastics, or St. Pierre's got a backyard full of shit over there. They need to go too. Right. So it's like, they're just I mean, obviously there are some common sense things, right? If you're screwing over people, if you're abusing animals, if you're, doing a very small, very narrow subset of things. Yeah. But then again, abusing animals, that's eye of the beholder right there, because what we consider, God, I'm losing the words today. There's not enough coffee kicking in my brain yet.
I can relate.
You know what I'm saying, though? I mean, what we would consider to be, above board, high standards. Somebody that doesn't keep reptiles might consider everything that we do animal abuse. You've got animals in tanks. Doesn't matter if they're healthy and outwardly, appear to be, in good spirits and good shape and all that. They don't give a shit about that. The fact is, you got it in a box. And so, you got to kind of protect yourself from the extremes at both ends. Yeah. So I just tend to think that things just have, I mean, if you're consistently screwing people over and sending out, or abusing animals, and you're sending out half dead things and stuff like that, eventually you're going to just by attrition disappear. Mm-hmm. And the ones that don't, well, maybe they're not as bad as we think they are. And then there's the other thing where there's this thing where these people that have no business buying imports buy imports. They don't have the slightest idea how to deal with them, and then they cry foul when they die, and they blame the guy they bought them from. Well, it's not necessarily the guy you bought them from. Sure. you played a huge role in that. I mean, both of you have had plenty of that basically imports should be left to people like us, people that have a lot of experience, people that understand you're not just going to do what you would do with the ball python that you bought at the local reptile show. You can't just do that. It has to be, you have to be experienced at it. The imports are for people that have a long history, at least 5 or 6 years, into this, that are serious about it. So, but again, you could say, well, then the importers shouldn't be marketing their stuff to the general public at that point. And that's a fair criticism as far as I'm concerned. So, I don't know, man. Everything is just, it just is what it is. There's it's never going to be perfect. There's always going to be some negatives. There's always going to be lots of positives. It's the same thing with anyone's. I'm sure there are people that, just like they did with Brian, there were people that had criticisms of him and then there were people that more than not loved that guy. And he wouldn't be as universally loved as he was, if he was a bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
So, and yeah, like I said, I knew him personally. I knew that he was a nice guy. He absolutely loved reptiles. He's been in it he was as serious about it as anybody else. And it's just funny to see the whole flipping on the rack thing, when the racks were, they're a tool for doing what we do. Mm-hmm. And they definitely play a role in certain, situations, and they have their place. It's not like, seeing this guy as some kind of that's how everybody used to keep snakes back then, especially colubrids. They were all done in racks, and racks took colubrid keeping to a level that had not been possible before that. But you can go back, racks that were used by like the Miami Serpentarium and the Ross Allen like the venomous people use those things going back to the 30s and 40s. So, maybe even further back than that. I don't know, but they served their. Philip Leitz has left the building. It was that Juan dude.
Oh man. No, he's back. He's just got to drive to the academy, so he switched to his phone.
Oh, is that what he's doing?
Sorry about that, guys. I gotta make sure I get up to my academy in time, and I'm like an hour. My shop is like almost a little over an hour away, so I have to make sure I get up there.
What is it? Was it a little cold over there?
It's a little cold here in Colorado, sir. Dude, it was like -11 for 4 days straight for a little while, like a few weeks back. And it's finally supposed to break 50 degrees next week during the day. And it's just like, oh my God.
Here I was out herping yesterday, flipping snakes.
Shut up, Roy.
Where are you at now, Roy?
I'm in Northern California.
Oh, you're in Northern California.
Yeah. Yeah, but I was out yesterday. I found a few. I got a rubber boa and a few garters and stuff like that. Nothing super crazy, but it's
I don't know. That's pretty
fun
cool,
to
man.
find snakes in January. Yeah.
Dude, he took some beautiful. Roy is very modest, but he is one hell of a photographer. Even though he feels like he's like, oh, I'm still trying to figure this camera out. But meanwhile, it's like it is an absolutely gorgeous photograph of that rubber boa. By the way. So
thanks, man.
Shut the hell up.
Send one to Ron in the chat so you can see the poop snake.
The poop snake.
That's cool, man.
Yeah.
No.
It's kind of an interesting thing in a lot of ways because some of the stuff you were talking about, Ron. I feel I have like mixed feelings about this stuff, right? Because I obviously agree with you, and I'm on board with like. We were talking earlier, we were basically saying something along the lines of if the only tool you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. So like different jobs kind of require different tools and different solutions, And yet I still like this also brushes into the reputation question, where it feels like, we spend all this time talking and trying to drive people to making better decisions in what we do and trying to set better examples. And yet, like, we still got guys who to this day get into groups in on Facebook and I don't know if they're trolling or what, but they talk about people like me who are trying to make a legitimate living off of breeding a species that has demand and has real value as like a criminal, where I'm like extorting the value of Uromastyx somehow by charging like a reasonable price for what it takes to produce these things. And then intentionally going out and saying they're going to import ornates by the many hundreds just to be able like a lower price and all this stuff. And it's just like, man, I get it. Like on some level, I understand. It's like you see an economic opportunity and you're trying to take advantage of it. Like, okay, that's fine. Mm-hmm. I'm also not necessarily opposed to the importation process. That's how I have my animals, like that's how I have them in the first place. Like I have to have some level of like appreciation for that. But when someone does it in that way, it's like it's clearly like such a like I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't say it's like a poor ethical decision. It's like, man, come on, really? Like you really don't have to, like, there's a better way to do this, and it's not that. I don't know. And maybe I'm just being a bitter, like, how did you say it earlier on? Like a whiny bitch, as it were. And, yeah. Maybe that's going to be on our quote tile for the show. No. Be like, don't be a whiny bitch.
No, don't misunderstand. No, I get what you're. I got people leaving. I get what you're saying. As far, I mean, I've dealt with that shit myself, right? I mean, you're always going to have, just, the random thorn in your side. Don't go dying, Phil. Try to deep breath, son.
Go dying on us.
I had a gnarly flu right after the new year, and no matter what not no matter what, but there's just this light cough that's been hanging on ever since that flu, man, real bad. So I'm okay. I'm just like, I look like I'm dying when I cough. So my bad.
Look, I've managed to maintain a really good reputation. You also have a really good reputation. Roy also has. You don't have to fucking pay any mind to any of this shit. Right. Mm-hmm. You're in a level where anybody that is doing that kind of stuff to you, most of them, first of all, paper tigers. It's all talk and nothing ever comes of it. It's just fucking bluster and bullshit. And even if somebody does, first of all, what that entire story that you just said, that is not sustainable. Nobody's going to bring in, first of all, I don't think it would be possible these days. And if it was, the noose on from CITES is getting tighter and tighter anyway. It's getting harder and harder. This is kind of the reason why, I had such an imperative about getting a larger group of northern emeralds. Mm-hmm. That pipeline may stay open for a long time, but I've seen so many pipelines close over the last 5 or 10 years, and especially with things like Uromastyx. CITES pays attention to. They pay attention to Uromastyx. They don't want a bunch of, that's an animal that could probably be legitimately wiped out because of the ease of collection and, where it's from. It's not. They're similar to tortoises in that regard, right? I mean, it wouldn't be difficult to probably wipe them legitimately out. They're already caught in enormous numbers, many of them for food.
Yeah. Right.
So I don't think you're going to see that. People that talk shit, dude, you just got to fucking let them talk and just don't pay any attention.
Yeah, no. And you're totally right. And I'm not trying to say that I'm bothered by people talking shit. I mean, it doesn't really bug me too much. I definitely have long tried to employ that perspective, which basically you were the one who encouraged me to think that way. I'm just saying it's it was more meant to cite an example of when I think someone is clearly just acting in bad faith. It's like, dude, you either you're doing this to troll, which is like, fine. All right. Like, I like to piss people off too. Sometimes it's fun if you're weird, I guess. But at the same time, it's like, man, it's hard. It can be challenging sometimes to feel like you spend all this time setting an example and really trying to set like a good standard. It's like, if I charge you $800 to $1,000 for a killer male ornata, I think you're more likely to take damn good care of that thing because it cost you some coin to get it. But if you but then you get these guys who are like, I see a market opportunity, and then they import a bunch from wherever and they charge half the price just to make a bunch of money, and those animals go to homes where they're not as well cared for. And then now, especially too, I think it's going to be even weirder because it was one thing when we would ask someone to go to, like, it'd be hard to ask somebody to go to Somalia or Yemen to collect because they'd be risking their life to collect for something.
Mm-hmm.
And now, where do most ornata come from? Egypt, Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Might be something going on in that part of the world right now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's hard for me to believe that someone's going to take the time to go collect a bunch of lizards in that area. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It's just weird. It's just something I think about. And so I didn't mean it to be like I'm whining about someone who's sticking in my craw. That's not at all. I don't even think I have a craw, but
that's where you keep the wand.
Oh, he's gone now.
We lost him.
Oh, sorry.
Now he's back.
Sorry. Dude, I usually think Roy's over there using Starlink to do these podcasts, so I'm usually thinking he's the one who's going to cut out, but it's me. So,
somehow it works. It's getting better and better as we go, thankfully. But
thanks, Elon.
Ron, I want to be mindful of your time. I think we've been bullshitting for an hour and a half or something now. So if you have space for a few more questions, and then we can kind of wrap up.
Dude, I got the whole day cleared, so we're good.
Okay.
Whatever you need.
Okay.
Nice.
Okay. Well, one thing I'm curious about is actually more about kind of herp podcasts in general. And I know you've listened to our show in the past, and there's other shows out there. And this is something Phil and I have been talking about a little bit, but just like this question of whether or not like podcasts seem to be trending in the direction of being like educational and like valuable and kind of a net positive for herpetoculture more generally, or if it's like gonna just intensify the existing echo chambers, and whether or not it seems like maybe both of these things are happening simultaneously, but I'm curious, like, if you've got a read on that.
Yeah, I think both are happening at the same time. Again, just like YouTube, I only really listen to the serious ones. It's mostly you guys. Mm-hmm. It's NPR. It's just a handful of very serious ones. Then there's a bunch of other ones that are, kind of in the middle somewhere. They toe the line between information and popular whatever. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I don't know what the phrase would be, but I don't know. I mean, yeah, I think you're going to get a little bit of both. I think, and that's how it's going to end up sorting itself out in the end. You'll have a few very successful, very serious sort of podcasts that are more for the hardcore people like us. And then you'll have some that are more for like, people that maybe just have a couple pets or new and just kind of getting it, or kids, I don't really see most of these really hardcore ones being very attractive to kids initially. They're going to look at that as kind of dry and boring. These guys are a bunch of grumpy old men talking about shit. You know what I'm saying? But
hell yeah.
But then some of the kids that are coming up will eventually morph into, they'll hit a point where they're like, oh, this is cotton candy and I want a steak now. And then they start looking at, so that's kind of how I see that kind of shake out. It's like that in everything. I mean, you can look at that Roy always, not Roy, but Filber over there always uses like jujitsu analogies and shit, but I can look at it from like other stuff that I'm into, like, whether it's video games or rock music or anything like that. There's a flourish of a whole bunch of things, like just say a band scene will come up, a certain place. Right now it's in like Georgia. There's a ton of really awesome bands, and eventually it will settle back down and there'll be a couple of them left standing, and they will be the ones from that scene. And, and then one of them will go on to be this huge pop sensation at some point. You know what I'm saying? Stuff like that. That just seems how it always works out in everything, no matter what it is. So that'll be the great sorting. And obviously we back you guys sometimes. So we think you guys are one of the ones that's going to be left standing.
Let's hope so.
Nirvana and Pearl Jam.
I wouldn't have put Pearl Jam in there. I mean, they did. They became the big pop. But yeah, the Seattle scene was.
I was always more kind of an Alice in Chains guy, but
yeah, me too. Yeah, I was Alice in Chains and Mudhoney and
yeah.
Soundgarden.
Melvin's Soundgarden. Yeah, I discovered that before anybody had ever heard of them, and I had all these. There was a little independent record label called Sub Pop, and I was buying directly from them and getting, like, I had Nirvana records before they were ever signed to a major, and nobody knew who they were. And I needed to cash. When I got a divorce in 2016, I needed to cash stuff out. So I had like 2,000 CDs and records, and a lot of them were from that era. And I had pristine first pressing Sub Pop of all those fucking bands. Holy shit. Yeah, that was I was shocked at what that stuff was worth. Like,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the pandemic, I sold a bunch of Pokemon cards that I was collecting since I was a little kid. Yeah, it was awesome. It was the same kind of thing. I was like, damn, I didn't know these still had value like that. It was cool.
It's funny. It's funny you bring that up though, because earlier you were talking about like the reptile thing is in like a downturn, and we're definitely, the entire economy of the world is in, because we're basically in this like pre-World War II type scenario right now, where it's pretty clear we're involved in World War III. We just don't know it yet. Like it's here, and it is what it is. But we're in the same kind of situation, and but Heather was going through, and we were actually doing pre-pandemic levels. So we're it was kind of and we've talked to other people that are also basically doing the pre-pandemic thing. Like, we're back to normal as far as, we just all got too used to, everything selling. Yeah, it was a pandemic bubble. And so, and it was like that with everything too. Like it's funny because before this happened, Eddie Soto was here and some other people, and we were talking, and I was like, look, there's a virus in China. I've been watching it for a while. I'm pretty sure it's all over the world by now. So we're gonna stop doing shows and we're gonna stay home. This was like in December 2019, and everybody was like, oh man, what does that mean? And I was like, look, I said, think about this: if there is a pandemic and we end up locking down, and people have to change their habits, they're not going to be going out anymore. They're not going to be, but they're still going to want entertainment. And guess what booms in times like that? When the times are bad, hobbies, pets, hobbies. That's why the Pokemon cards sold well. That's why. Yeah. So we actually benefit from bad times. I mean, we will benefit. If inflation continues to be a thing, people will stop taking vacations. They will start staying home. They're not going to sit home and do nothing. And we are benefiting now, and we will continue to benefit from that. So it's actually, even though there is a price adjustments and there's things going on, and a lot of the people that came in during the pandemic, unfortunately, are learning the hard truth about how difficult this is to make a living at. The people that can do it will do fine. We'll all be fine. So
that's fascinating. Really
No, go ahead.
appreciate that perspective, Yeah, it's just an interesting perspective, because I feel like I don't buy into a lot of people I know, and for their own reasons. Like, I'm not judging their rationale necessarily, but they say there's a lot of gloom and doom. A lot of people get really upset. They're like, oh, this is the worst I've ever seen it. I'm like, bro, you're 31.
Right.
Like, I'm, you know what I mean? I'm like, so what? Like, 30, you want to talk about myopia? You know what I mean? It's like, get out of here, dude. You don't have the long-term perspective to know like how bad this really is, or, whatever. And it's like, oh my, Brendan and I were talking this morning about, he was like, well, I think the ball python, and I'm not making fun of Brendan at all. He was like, well, I really think the ball python market is like legitimately crashing. I'm like, Brendan, you're 20. Like it's been the ball python market has existed longer than you've been alive. Like, how do you know? Like, we're and I get it. It's because it's things look spooky sometimes. You get really nervous. Stuff doesn't move. Stuff doesn't sell. You see prices dropping. Blah blah blah. You get real freaked out. You see people making videos about how, wow, everything's imploding, and you're like, well, I don't know. I think it is like a natural change. Just stuff has to kind of go up and down all the time. It's just how it goes. So actually, that kind of brings me to another question we had, one of the last couple. And it's basically, if you could go back 30s maybe. Did I go away again? Did I drop out?
You're back for a second, yeah.
Okay. God damn it.
We heard, so if you could go back.
Yeah, if you could go back to when you were in your 30s, what would be one piece of advice you give yourself, that now, or that you employ now, that you would tell yourself back in the day?
Is he still? Are you guys still there? Because
I'm still here.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. I don't know. I beat my own ass for sure. That's the first thing I do. I don't know. I did
self-flagellation.
Yeah, I did a lot of stupid shit when I was. I don't know, man. I don't think I would change anything, but because if I hadn't done all the stuff that I did, I don't think I would have led me to where I am, and I'm actually pretty happy with where I ended up. So, I mean, I would have probably been. Well, I can tell you this. So it was 2001. So I would have been like 33. That was when I hit a real rough patch, because I tried to do that Tegu thing on a scale.
Right.
I had 250 adults, and I just refused to accept that it wasn't working. So rather than react to my environment, which I knew that the environment that I was in was not conducive. It would rain too much in Loxahatchee. It was constantly, the water was, when you stepped on the ground, water would come up when you walked in the yard.
Jeez.
That's how, so the water was just under the surface of the grass. And I knew it was too wet and it wasn't working. And at that point, I should have switched to a chameleon-centric breeding operation, which I was fully prepared to do, but I was so stubborn and stupid that I just couldn't do it. So I ended up running myself into the ground, and it was 5 years of very painful stupidity. And at the same time, I had a garage with a bunch of the first, I had boomorphs that I was the only one that had them. And rather than put my emphasis on that instead of the 250 Tegus, I sold all of that and put everything into the failing Tegu thing, because I thought, well, if I just put more into this, it'll fix it. It'll get better. And I basically was fighting the environment. And that was probably the most important lesson I ever learned. Do not try to fight against where you are. Learn to operate within the boundaries of what is afforded to you by your particular location, your particular financial status, all those things. Don't fight against it. Operate within the confines that are afforded to you, and eventually you'll break down the walls and be able to get to go outside of those. But and it's funny because I knew that. I mean, that was how when I built this, my initial thing when I was younger, I didn't have shit. I mean, we had $300 in the bank. Stella was pregnant with my daughter. She had just gotten laid off, and we were living in a 650 square foot house in a neighborhood where hookers walked down the street and people sold crack on the corner. And you know, it was, and I knew, you know, that whole place was built on working with what I had, you know, learning how to do stuff, you know, and operating it. And I was able to get us out of there and then get into, you know, move into an actual safe neighborhood for my daughter to grow up in and stuff like that. So I knew that, but just, I don't know whether it was my own hubris or just arrogance at the time, but I thought, oh no, I can definitely make this work. And I thought I could, you know, go outside those boundaries just because I wanted to. And that's one of those times I got punched in the face, and I deserved it, and it was worth it.
So, I like that. That's a great response. I appreciate that a lot. And, you know, I have to say, I feel like I'm really glad we had you. We did this because for everybody, I mean, obviously it's great to talk with you in general, but like, you know, I think we had you on, I don't know, it was within the first 5 podcasts we did, right? I mean, it was
episode 3.
Yeah, it was like episode 3. It was right up in there, and it was it's really cool.
And here we are at episode 69.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, the best episode. That's amazing.
It's hard to believe it's that many now.
I know.
I know, it's crazy.
You're telling us. I mean, when we hit a year, you know, we got to like 52, and it was like, whoa, this is weird. And anyway, the reason I mentioned that is because it's really great to have another conversation, and one that feels, I mean, frankly, better. I mean, you know, like I feel like, you know, not to get too emotional or anything, but this is like, I feel like this is the best show we've done. I don't know why. It's just something about the conversation that I really enjoyed this a lot. And so I just, like, I don't know. I just appreciate that whole response. And so I guess there's one last question, and it's kind of like a riff on the one we ask everybody, but we'd be remiss if we didn't have like a follow-up. And that's basically, we always ask everyone sort of why herpetoculture, right? And, you know, I'm just, have any, if there's any, if you feel any different kind of way about it than the last time we spoke, you know, do you feel like you have any new thoughts about, or new feelings around why we do this, you know, good or bad, and big scale, small scale, like, you know, local, global? Yeah. You have any thoughts on that?
Shit, man. No, not really. I mean, it's pretty much, you know, honestly, that's not something I've ever really thought about too much. I just have always, it's just, for me, it's just part of who I am. It's what I do. I don't think I can do anything else. You know, it's just like, it was never a thought of not to do this. It was always like, okay, this is what I do, and I have to do this. I have to make this work. Now my motivations, you know, have changed over the years. And now that, you know, I'm actually more stoked about this than I have been in probably a very long time. The emerald thing is, you know, and trying to work out how to get them outside, you know, in a system and have it work. And so many people told me it was not possible, and the fact that it would never work, and that the whole thing would fail. And, you know, and then when winter came, it was kind of hairy there in the beginning, and I knew winter was going to be tough because they're you know, they're obviously they're equatorial. They're not, you know, they're very they're not as tolerant as a lot of like the other stuff that we work with. I knew that I had to do some stuff, so that's why the system that we built was different than anything I've done. But honestly, I have never been more proud of something that I've done, or happier with it, and gotten as much enjoyment out of what this is. This is definitely, and I'm going to continue to iterate on it. Right now, we're using what is fairly large enclosures for them. So for every emerald, they're in a 4x4x2, which is full of trees. And But eventually I think I'm going to expand that out to be much larger, like 4x8s and stuff like that.
Nice.
Once I get more
Nice.
comfortable with it, it's a learning process, but
Yeah.
it's been fun. And, you know, I mean, that's what this is supposed to be, right? We're supposed to, if
Yeah.
you're doing something like this, you better fucking enjoy it, because that's the reward, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Right. That's awesome. That's a great
Well
answer.
said,
Yeah, very nice. Well, I suppose that'll call it for the day, I guess. Right, Roy? You feel anything else you want to throw out there or anything like that?
No, just thanks, Ron. As always, it's a pleasure
Yeah.
to talk with you, man. Appreciate your insight and your willingness to make time for us. And well, I'm looking forward to the next time.
And
You guys got it, man. It was fun. Phil keeps freezing. Look at that.
Poor
Look at that
Phil.
pose. He was frozen
blue
in a-
steel for a second there.
that should be the link mark.
There we go.
Well, all I was going to say was just that I think this episode comes out tomorrow. I think it'll release tomorrow, so it'll be like a short turnaround on this one. So, which is nice. So, thanks again, and looking forward to the next time we can do this again and have you back on and talk about some more cool shit. Hopefully, at episode 169.
I better not be. It better not be 100 friggin' episodes before I get back on here.
No,
it's good. No, it'll be before that. But that one's already reserved for you.
Yeah, dude.
I'm fucking with you guys. No, you know, as always, man. Anytime you guys want me to come on and run my mouth, feel free to hit me up. I'll always be there for you.
Awesome.
Thanks, man.
Thank you for that.
Means a lot.
You're the best.
Yep, you guys got
All right.
it.
All right.
All right, gentlemen. Well, have a good day.
All right.
Yeah, I'll hit the button.
See you guys later.
Right here we go.